Hey, Michael McGinnis, part two of The Road Less Traveled. I finished off on part one, just talking about, the years that it would take me to really to go through, to debrief, to process through the experience. Frankly, now looking back, it was a better part of 10, 20 years. And I think there's still elements that I'm still processing since it was so rich with events and experiences that really helped to formulate a major shift and change in attitudes, beliefs, and I still think it's emerging, as I mentioned today. I finished off with a sentence and then I'll continue forward. I said, I just knew in my heart that I had to escape from my life experience that felt like I was living behind a fence to discover what was out there, which I came to learn was actually about learning to discover what was in here, inside me. The answer came apart from Michael Crichton's quote, such direct experience inevitably makes you aware of who it is that is having the experience. That was not always comfortable, but it is always invigorating, end quote. Powerful comment that now years later I could say I'm really just sort of understanding what he was referring to. The key is grasping what is meant by aware of who it is that is having the experience. This refers to an advanced spiritual topic, as I'd refer to it, where you begin to wonder who, for example, the higher self, is really examining you, your personality, on who we are, and what we're made up of. And that was this intriguing concept. Is it's referred to in some of the circles as the I am, and that and the rest of it, what follows after I am, is about us, who we are, and our personality form. Whereas the I am is the real true sense of self that transcends time and personality and the physical aspect of life. Just to give you a thought too, that's even super profound, is there's the discussion in terms of who's really the I in the I am. And sort of the reference there is to the all being, if you put it in terms of a deity or sense of deity, or what today is really referred to as consciousness, is that level that's behind everything that sort of makes up. Anyways, advanced topics, I'll get to those in some of my other podcasts. I relate this to my own awareness that a higher self existed within me. And that came from even earlier on. This is, I was in a 12-step group for 12-step for codependency. 12-step is probably most notable for Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, et cetera. And it's a very structured program. And they reference this sense of a higher entity is like higher self. And at first really connected with me because growing up in a very religious setting that I really didn't agree with, there was a lot of abuse in that church. You're probably giving away which word of religion that is, but that that it wasn't this deity or this person up there, that there really had to be something else different than that. And that's where that concept of higher self really connected with me at that point. But I said it this again, I relate to this, I relate this to my own awareness that a higher self existed within me that would observe my life experience in a different way than my personality did. And that's a way to describe my physical presence, is my personality. I use meditation and other quiet moments to attempt to connect with my higher self for guidance and direction. And I'm still doing that today. I think I'm better at it today in terms of really starting to connect with a sense of awareness and guidance and direction there. And again, that's a whole nother story. My personal and spiritual growth was a direct result of these experiences, along with how I process them. The collection of these experiences and reflection is what ultimately changed who I am, my attitudes, beliefs, and values, which is the primary value of traveling on the road less traveled, right? It's no longer subscribing to other points or other views in terms of what we should believe in, what we should do, but really coming to grips with that for our own individual sense of self. The truth is not easy to accept at times. And again, truth is a hard word to use, is that it's unfortunately so battered because everybody references their truth or their belief that the truth is this one thing. And I don't mean it in that way. I just realize I put it really more in terms of your truth. Your truth, what you come to grip with is, hey, all these scenarios out there, taking your research, the time, your own methods, being able to sort of connect inside through meditation or whatever the case may be, you come back to your truth. But the benefit comes from opening your eyes and processing all of this information that you gather through your soul search. It is in our gut-wrenching moments that we discover who we are. And that's where I had experienced. I mean, again, a lot of pain, suffering, tough elements, and then even the process of healing and recovering was tough stuff, right? Again, as I mentioned before in the last session, I can totally understand why people don't venture down this path. It's scary. It's a lot of work, but to me, the value is so much worth it because you sort of cut through and answer all of these giant questions that otherwise would still be looming in my own head and contemplating it for sake of really coming to grips with your answer about things. It is in these moments that we see life for what it is versus through the rose-colored glasses that we are wearing or it's presented to us on TV or shows or the news. It is in these moments that we confront the meaning of life. What a profound statement. And that was really, in effect, my journey. It was to go out and understand the meaning of life. And it did. And I'll talk about that. The question is whether we discipline ourselves to open our eyes and then open our mind. What may sound ludicrous is the fact that confronting these types of experiences helped me to see life for what it is, which enabled me for the first time to see me for who I really am, along with ultimately the fact that there is true meaning to life. As I returned home between journeys, I spent my time volunteering in roles such as an EMT or emergency medical technician on volunteer ambulance, a hospice care provider, a counselor in a children's oncology camp, and a number of other roles. And so you can already see that there was a common denominator. It wasn't until later that I realized that this common denominator about my volunteer roles had to do with death. My mom died from cancer when I was 14 years old. It was a traumatic experience, and at such a vulnerable time in my life. But it was how she died that confused me. She was in a coma, and we were told that she would die anytime. And I remember being next to her deathbed, in effect, where just her breathing was very raspy, few and far between. And, I felt like really she was dying. A few hours later, we were called to her bedside at the hospital where she was. And there she was, sitting upright, fully alert, smiling. She had put her glasses on. I mean, just totally different than what we had experienced just a few hours before. She utilized that time to say her goodbyes to each of us, stating several times that she would be 100% better. She laid back down and died within a couple of hours. The doctors could not explain this. What was amazing related to my experience in hospice care many years later was that these situations were fairly common. There clearly was a mystical element to death that is overlooked and over time taught me that there is so much more to death and post-death. It is sad that we are such a death-adverse culture that goes to great lengths to avoid talking about a topic we are all going to experience through our life and with our loved ones, along with confronting our own mortality. Following my modern day vision quest, right, that 4-year period, which I went out and comprised of all of these trips, of which I shared just a smattering of the stories that related to the experience during that time. I returned to quote normal life. It was at the end of my travels en route to my last international flight from Poland that I realized that I wanted to return home and raise a family. I was talking to a flight attendant who shared that this was her last flight. She would leave her job and she was doing that so for purposes of raising a family. I remember falling into tears when she said that to me again. It was a very different experience. Men didn't cry in that era and that time, but it naturally sort of came to me when something really provoked something within me, and I paid attention to those times. And as she shared this, I only realized that I too wanted to share that desire. And that was what I wanted to do, to return now from this incredible adventure, to go back and settle down and raise a family before it would be too late. My dear friend Tom Sawyer, who I mentioned earlier, the one who had the near-death experience, suggested that having a family, job, and career would also help to ground me, which was the absolute truth. Each time I returned home, I would isolate myself for several weeks, sometimes several months. Some of them referred to it, as just really a period of time, what they called reentry effect, which is where I was attempting to try to return only to realize that I was a very different person. And I was struggling with that difference in how I attempted to try to relate to people who still know me, who I was, prior to that adventure. Whenever I attempted to share the real experiences, I would lose my audience because I would talk about it at such a deep, profound effort. They were more interested in, hey, what did I see? What were some of the sights I wanted to see or that I saw? How about the foods that I ate? And to me, that was just so superficial that I couldn't even really get immersed in those kinds of conversations. Me now, I was in the depths of philosophy and the depths of who I was as a result of that experience. The road less traveled is about a journey we take within, the hardest yet the most rewarding kind. I'm going to repeat that, right? Because in effect, I think that's the essence of it. The road less traveled is about a journey you take within. We may go all over the place outside of ourselves, but ultimately it is, as Michael Crichton said, about discovering ourselves. And it's hard. It's hard. It's truly hard, difficult, challenging, because we've got to confront the beliefs, the attitude, perspective as we come to grips with trying to figure out our own. Returning home with a desire to settle down and raise a family seemed a daunting task after all I had been through. The idea of returning to corporate life made me ill, frankly. It was the last thing on my mind to do, but necessary to raise a family. I considered my options, but kept returning to my desire. I had changed. The breadth and depth of my experiences in Vision Quest changed me from the inside out, beginning with my core beliefs and values. I saw life in a very different perspective now. And yet the human side of me still wanted to fit in, have friends, be liked, be loved, and enjoy the basic human needs based on what Abraham Maslow shares in his hierarchy of needs. For the next 30 years, my focus was characteristic of the famous Zen proverb. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry the water. After enlightenment, guess what it is? Chop wood, carry the water. Did the same thing. That's the human existence. It was a challenge since I had to shelve my experiences and play the game that was needed to survive in corporate America. I was still me, but not the real authentic me. I had to wear the masks and facades that really allowed me to be able to go and fit in and do the job at hand. But I knew that now. I had the self-awareness to understand the reason for doing it, and that I was doing it with the primary purpose of being able to choose to raise a family. I learned how to be a chameleon in order to fit in. Frankly, it was lonely, very lonely at times, since my heart and soul just wanted to be where I could be truly authentic. But I had accepted my duty now to my family and my job, which meant that I had to be the breadwinner. When I realized, or what I realized is that in order to fully experience a human experience, I had to be fully human, right? Human, and that's what it is. And life wasn't going to change for me just because I had gone through all this life-changing experiences. Life was going to continue. We're still going to run the way it has been run, with working for a living and raising a family, promulgating a species, so on and so forth, right? As I look back now, I am grateful for these experiences since these challenges represented the continuous growth opportunity to find ways to live my values despite all of the temptations around me. A major challenge in and of itself. So why in heck would I ever suggest getting on the road less traveled with all of these challenges? Right? I mean, just reading this now and sharing it with you just reminds me, what was I, crazy or something? But the answer really to me is very simple. And it begins with the sentence that was in the call. You may choose not to hear your spirit. If you hear it and ignore it, your life is lost. And that's exactly what happened with me. I had that gnawing feeling. Remember that quest, that desire to really understand things. And when it started to open up and I had first received, the call from one of my colleagues and had this deep awareness that this is it, this is what I really want to do, want to be, I realized I had to. I knew for me, I didn't have any other choice, right? And I think that that's a common denominator from those that I've met, who are on the road less traveled. The common thing is that something within them really drove them to the same conclusion. And yes, as hard and difficult as it is and was, it also has the greatest benefit because it's dealing with the greatest journey we will ever make in this life, our life. The voice within actually began when I was a young child. And that's where this process, as I reflected back and started to journal, I've started to recall. I just had no context for what these thoughts and feelings meant. Actually, I viewed them as a confirmation that I was screwed up and would never fit in, just as my dad had told me I was. However, I found ways to coexist, right? That's what we do. That's the human element. For those that persevere, there's resilience. We find that way forward. I can see now why some are drawn to the monasteries, as I was when I had visited the Basilica of St. Francis Assisi in Italy. What a beautiful place it was, by the way, and just so spiritual in scope. And studying St. Francis is just a wonderful experience in itself because he was just a simple mindset, set everything aside that was known for sake of his own spiritual journey. It is easier without life's distractions, as it was there. However, I will admit that it was coexisting with all of life's distractions that actually helped me to develop and become who I am. So in other words, immersing myself back in life with all the changes that I had created this incredible contrast, and it forced me, we're looking at not as a way that I'm better or worse than anybody else, but that we're equal. And it was just the fact that my awareness had changed dramatically as long as my values and beliefs. And that too is in order to experience some of the aspects of, quote, normal life, like raising a family, having some of the nice materialistic joys and satisfactions of life, it meant going back to work. It took many failures, and I underline that, it took many failures to find the strength and courage to be who I wanted to be versus what others wanted me to be. Now, I share a video, in the actual blog. It's on Discovering Michael, all one word, discoveringmichael.wordpress.com. And that's my blog, and incorporated into these posts are often video clips or links to other sources for more information. And I share a video, and it was just, again, one of them thousands, millions probably now by now of videos I watched that helped me as I really was searching, and I still am, as I'm contemplating different ideas and thoughts and aspects as it relates to the overall concept of the spiritual path. And the video that I shared is titled "For Those Who Don't Fit In Anywhere." And it relates to so well to one of the great challenges of growth. You become very different and struggle with the feeling of fitting in or not fitting in when the human aspect of who we are yearns for the feelings of love and belonging, as noted in Maslow's hierarchy. And the gentleman in the video really portrays his own, experience of basically moving away from society, living on his own, which has allowed him to really to go much more in depth into his own spiritual path. And that is the case. You hear people go into monasteries or others, but it's not a requirement. It's just one of the many paths towards whatever your truth ultimately is. What I really now understand is that life is what it is. And more importantly, an understanding of what life is about and why we are here. It was this study, this research that I have just such a passion to do, and personally went out to experience that again, it changed me to the very core and helped me to really rethink a lot of what were my former truths and beliefs that others in society and cultures and parents have really prescribed to me. It's a very personal belief that we develop. There's a lot in common that I found with some of the others on the spiritual path, but at the same time, we also discover our own uniquenesses and differences, just like we are as human beings. We are each unique and different. And I believe there's a real purpose for that. But that's, again, a much broader context, part of my other studies and research since this modern day vision quest, and I hope to share over time. It's that it's a personal belief and sense of knowingness that I really share, right? And I'm doing that now through the course of the podcasts and others, not with the intention to shape your viewpoint, to tell you what to think or whatever, but just primarily for those who may be having those same kinds of thoughts, that there's something deeper gnawing at them, that it's okay, and that there are many ways and many journeys you can take to get there. It doesn't mean you even have to leave your backyard, but what's common is this real nature, this desire to really come to understand life. It's a composite of thousands of experiences I open myself up to. People often say, what one moment changed your perspective in life? And I said, I can never answer that. I can't even rate these experiences, because it's the collective of them, the synergy aspect of them, that had the most profound effect. It was the realization that underneath all of these experiences, there were some commonalities that you could never get if you only had a few data points. But by having thousands of them, over time, I began to see things, understand things better. So to see the context of it, or the perspective. It's really difficult to explain, frankly, at times, because I'm not sure of the words to actually explain these kinds of thoughts and experiences. I feel incredible gratitude for my journey and the thousands of teachers I met along the way. Everybody I met was a part of that journey, right? And it really relates to the context that we are all one. And when we open up and share and meet with each other and open ourselves to the rich experience, incorporate some things that we want to from what we've learned, versus just sticking to our own dogma and rituals, we become much broader, much more open individuals. Upon my deathbed, and I've contemplated that, right? I mean, that's the reality, that common denominator of death is amongst my volunteer activities. It forced me to realize is that we are going to die. What a powerful statement. I'll share that later as I talk about my experience with Stoicism, which I think is incredible philosophy that existed in there 2,000 years ago. That profound. Frankly, I would have fit right in at that time there because a lot of their thoughts and contemplations and viewpoints and perspectives fit very much what my conclusions were. Heck, I could have saved time. Well, but even if I did, I would have subscribed to somebody else's perspective. The real value is that I really gained it myself. As they say, skeptics make the best believers. I was a skeptic. I was skeptical about everything. But over time, as I opened up, I began to see the bigger picture. And as I come to my deathbed, I will utter to myself that I did it. I did it. And that's this most awesome thought. Oh, what did you do? You worked at a family, all of those things. But beyond that is that I followed my desire. I followed that, even though it meant going away from the mainstream, giving away all of those human elements and desires for sake of really going a different path. Does this suggest that I'm better than you, better than others? No, absolutely not. It does not. I'm not. It's only that I have a different awareness. That's all. I think my perspective has grown through the enormity of the experiences had, in contrast to many who don't have them. Does that make them a bad person? Absolutely not. They're there for their life. And who am I to critique their life? That may be exactly what their life and life's meaning is all about. It is just that I discovered my calling and I went after it, just as I wish each of you to do, whatever that calling may be. My calling was for me. It may have similarities to others, but in no way represents what your calling should be. It is, however, with our sharing that we may inspire others to discover their own calling. And that's my hope. Thanks so much for letting me take a little time to be a part of your life and sharing these experiences. And I hope in some way it really helped. If it does, that's how I get my kicks and giggles in life. Thanks for sharing.